Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting for the Wilson County Board of Education for April 25th, 2022 to order. Members of the board, next on the agenda is calling for the approval of the agenda. Mr. Mercer, I think you are going to need to ask for an amended agenda, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I can't remember right now what I was going to amend.
Excuse us, please.
Yes, yes. The architect,
Information
yeah,
section.
we were going to, excuse me for that, but, Madam Chair, I wanted to amend it so we could allot time in the evening's meeting or during, possibly the Administrative Services Committee to, allow time for the architects for the, Lee Woodard Barnes, project could share with us information regarding, answer questions that came up earlier meeting.
All right, members of the board, is that agreeable that we need to have a motion? If you'll make that as a motion and then the chair will entertain.
I move we add to the agenda during the Administrative Services Committee, portion for the architects for the Lee Woodard Barnes projects.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded that the agenda be amended so as to include a Lee Woodard Barnes project update from the architect. Is there any discussion?
Will that come under information item?
It will come under information under the administrative services, and I will make that item B for that purpose. Is there any other question or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. And as we are amending the agenda, under information items for instructional services, if a member of the Instructional Services Committee would make a motion to remove the green light report and carry that over to the May meeting, it would be appreciated.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we move the green light from our present agenda item until the May meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Mercer and Mrs. Powell. Thank you. That we remove the green light item from our tonight's agenda and place it on the May meeting agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Members of the board and the public, we are meeting and being televised on Spectrum and Greenlight Channel 22 and live streamed through the Wilson County Schools YouTube channel. The public can also view the meeting through the links on the Wilson County Schools Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages and the Wilson County Schools website. We'll make you aware that Dr. Mills is under weather tonight, and so he is participating in our board meeting through our Zoom link. So that is why his seat is empty tonight, and I thought it was very nice that he didn't want to contaminate us with whatever.
Did we approve the agenda as amended?
Thank you so much. Members of the board, since we have amended the agenda, the chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the amended agenda.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell,
I move that we approve the amended agenda for tonight's April 25th, 2022 Wilson County Board of Education meeting.
Second.
it has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by, I think that was Mr. Mercer, that we approve the amended agenda for April 25th, 2022. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Now, Mr. Borkin, if you will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the board, in your packet, you have minutes for the meetings of March 21st, 2022, a regular board meeting, March 28th, 2022, a work session, April 13th, 2022, public hearing, and April 13th, 2022, work session. What is your pleasure in regard to those minutes?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the March 21st, 2022 regular board meeting, March 28th work session, April 13th public hearing, and April 13th work session.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, that the minutes of March 21st, 2022, the regular board meeting, March 28th, 2022, work session, April 13th, 2022, public hearing, and April 13th, 2022, work session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Now for the chairman's report. First of all, I'd like to welcome back our students, our faculty, and our staff from spring break. It's hoped that the time provided rest, relaxation, refreshing, and rejuvenation in preparation for the final stretch of this school year. It was brought out in committee meeting that there are 29 instructional days left before the end of the year. So we are truly in the short rows. And even though there have been challenges in the last couple of years, it is hoped that this break will allow everyone to continue the efforts to regain momentum of improved performance. And we hope that everyone stayed safe in their relaxed environment. I'd like to commend the Junior Achievement Program. There was an article highlighted in the paper recently about that particular program and our community sponsors that give students an opportunity for the hands-on and not just the theoretical base, and they had speakers who went into the classrooms to interact with the students. And congratulate the Wilson Education Partnerships on their latest fundraising event of boots and bow ties that benefit the students and the teachers of Wilson County Schools. And that ends my report. I'm going to turn to Dr. Mills for his report. Dr. Mills?
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and others. Just to piggyback on what Dr. Fitch was saying about spring break, we only have a few more weeks of class, which is a bit scary for some of us, but exciting for the rest of the group. But that means some graduation ceremonies are coming up, and there's a couple that are coming up right away, which are the early colleges. So on May 14th, Watts ceremony is at 10 a.m. and WECA's is at noon. That's on May 14th. So make note of that. We celebrate National Assistant Principals Week and our media coordinators in April.
Bless you.
What they do, that's seen and unseen, and heads up, the Teacher Appreciation Week is coming up the first week in May, so we're excited to recognize all the work that teachers do. Again, that's seen and unseen, especially as challenging a year this year has been and the last year as well. So we've got things planned for that. We're still waiting to hear back from the state about our needs-based public school grant application for the capital funds that we submitted in the hopes of securing funds for a new Frederick Douglass Elementary School. Remember, that was supposed to be around April 12th or so, but they did make some changes, we think, to the grant. And there were so many applications, so it's likely now that it may be a little bit later, obviously, because we're past that deadline, but we've not heard anything or seen anything, and I've checked again today. So as soon as we do, we'll let you know, and as soon as we do that, we'd like to get that out, so we can move forward from whatever direction we hear from. A reminder, Dr. Fitch mentioned this, and this was mentioned in committee earlier today. We have a special meeting on Wednesday, April 27th, board members, at 1 p.m. to interview architects for the new Frederick Douglass Elementary School. So that will be here in the boardroom. And then there's one final item that we do need to talk about, and I can do that with you now, or we can do that at the end of the meeting. But we need to select a date for a public hearing for, as required for statute for the board to discuss for possible closure of Toys Not Middle and Winston Elementary. That was something we said we would choose a date at the board meeting from your work session from last time you met. The next board meeting, I think, Ms. Horson, is the 16th of May. And so one date that you could consider is May 9th, which will be a week before. That's a Monday. Again, we have to notice it and just make that time available. I'm checking now for a location that will be suitable, and I can make the arrangements for that. But first, I wanted to see if that date would work and what times you were interested in.
All right, while he's there, members of the board, if you'll pull out your calendars so that we can check the availability.
I'm free.
I'm free.
I just have one thing that's early that morning, like at 8 o'clock.
I have something that morning too, but that evening or that afternoon.
May 9th works for me.
If, it's sounding like May 9th, but in the afternoon, as a couple of board members have morning commitments.
Typically, you've done these in the evenings when you've had
Okay,
some other items like this to allow folks who may work or get time off or make schedule arrangements with child care and other students to get by with ball games and other things going on. So that might work well to have it in the evening.
so at 6:30, members
I
of the
think
board?
any time like that will be fine.
6:30.
And I was gonna check with Mr. Johnston about using the auditorium at Fike. If that would work, or if the board was interested in that, or if you had no location you preferred.
I think folks, that's what we would be.
That would be a suitable place. It has a large seating capacity if needed.
Okay.
6 or 6:30, members of the board?
I think 7. I think that way people have the best opportunity to come and be heard.
Okay.
If possible, you got folks getting off work 5 and 5:30.
All right, is 7 o'clock workable?
Yes,
I'll make it.
yes.
I'm seeing a few head nods and
Yes.
a few.
Fine with me.
That's fine, 7 o'clock on Monday, May 9th.
Give me a Steve Harvey.
I'll confirm with Mr. Johnston and about the date and time, that there's no overlap with any events they have, and then we'll publish that.
And Madam Chair, so this will be for Winston and for Toys not one
Yes,
of
it will
each?
be.
Yes.
It's both of them combined together?
Yes.
Okay.
So once you have cleared with Mr. Johnson for the site, the date of the 9th works for the board members,
Yeah,
7
the date
o'clock.
and time for the 9th works fine. The location is to be confirmed. But
Okay,
I'm sure that will probably work fine. And Madam Chair, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Members of the board, let me go back. I overlooked a note for myself to you that I would like to go back and bring up at this point. In the past, we have made a nomination for Superintendent of the Year, and I wanted to know the RISA, the regional. RISA is the Regional, Central Carolina Regional Education Superintendents Association is soliciting nominations for Superintendent of the Year. I wanted to know your feelings in regard to a submission for Dr. Mills. If that is to be your pleasure, May 1st would be the deadline for making that submission. What is your pleasure in regard to this request from the RISA?
I would like for us to.
All right,
I'm in agreement.
all right. I'm hearing,
Yes.
I'm in
Agreed.
agreement, yes. Okay, so can we get that in the form of a motion and let it take formal action, please?
Madam Chair, I move we nominate Dr. Lane Mills as Superintendent of the Year.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Borkin, that we put in nomination the name of Dr. Lane Mills for consideration of Superintendent of the Year. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously, and Ms. Lynch, I'll get with you in the next day or two so that we can see if we can make that happen. Thank you so very much. It is now the point of our meeting where the public has an opportunity to give us their input. Each person is granted 3 minutes for his or her presentation. This portion of the meeting is for the board to hear matters of interest from the public. However, obscene or vulgar statements, personal attacks, and statements reasonably perceived to be disruptive or imminently threatening to the orderly operation of the meeting shall not be permitted. We do have 5 people who have signed up to address the board this evening. Ms. Cornetta, we're going to ask you to be the timekeeper. First is Tina McMichael, about being an educator at Toys Not Middle School this year.
Right. Thank you so much. I want to begin by clearly stating my intentions. I would like the board and the public to know and understand what I've experienced this year as a teacher in Wilson County Schools, and specifically at Toys Not Middle School. I began the year in the math partial multi-classroom leader MCL position, responsible for 3 6th grade math classes, as well as coaching and supporting the other math teachers in our school. I had a REACH associate that was assigned to assist with covering my classes so that I could fulfill the MCL roles and responsibilities. Unfortunately, due to vacancies that were never filled, a multitude of resignations, and lack of substitutes, this did not happen. My REACH associate has been covering the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes all year long. As opposed to coaching and supporting a math team, I'm the only full-time math teacher remaining at Toys Not Middle School. I prepare lessons, provide materials and instructions, as well as communicate with families and evaluate and input grades for the entire grade level. Our team of 6 teachers has dwindled to just 3 teachers and a full-time substitute. We've had to combine classes in order to ensure that students are supervised, but at the expense of not receiving core instruction in the areas of social studies and science. My team and I are consistently overworked, overwhelmed, and exhausted with what each day demands of us. While some may see the behavior of our students as an issue, I see our students lacking the tools that they need to advocate for themselves. Our students require adults to assist them in teaching them how to communicate appropriately for what they desire. They are acting out because they are lacking the #1 tool that they need, teachers. It is my hope that those in positions of leadership who could have stepped in and provided our students with guidance and support did not do so due to lack of knowledge of what exactly was happening in our school. However, this does not excuse those same individuals from not doing their due diligence and reaching out to the educators, students, and families to find out how they could best serve our community. Recently, we learned that Toys Not has been chosen as the potential location for students who are receiving a new school building. So what does that mean for our staff and our students? We have no idea, since none of these decisions included our thoughts or input. They were made behind closed doors and shared with us through a phone call made minutes before the public was notified. We were told in a recording that we were valued and assured that we had a place in the county. How are we supposed to believe this when all year we have watched as our value as educators in the county has seemingly been taken for granted, as we took on more and more without the support of those who value us? What does it mean to be valued by Wilson County Schools? Our value is unclear and inconsistent, and this results in an atmosphere of distrust and discontent, which filters down to our students and families. I'm beyond disappointed by our school system's leadership and the lack of action taken by those who could have stepped up to the plate. Maybe possibly was due to ignorance, as I stated at the beginning of this. My intent is to make you aware of what my colleagues, our students, and our families have experienced this school year.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Charles Bell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
At last month's public school board meeting at Wilson, let me try that again. At last month's public school board meeting, I asked if Wilson County Schools accommodate students of different genders that are not consistent with their biological sex. I appreciate your reply. With regards to this matter, are any biological boys allowed to use girls' bathrooms or locker rooms if they identify as a female? If so, are all parents of schools where this is taking place made aware of this? Do Wilson County Schools have teachers, psychologists, or counselors to help emotionally distressed students on a one-to-one basis? If so, who determines if a student is emotionally distressed? What criteria are used to determine this? Does the school get written permission from the parents to implement the counseling? Are the parents required to allow the school to intervene? Specifically, who decides how to best serve the student? Are the parents of the student directly involved throughout the entire process? Do the counselors impart their own beliefs and experiences to the student? With regards to the counselors implementing this, what credentials do they have to qualify them for this? Does Wilson County School System use a consultant firm to implement social emotional learning? With regards to student surveys, when the school notifies parents of an upcoming survey, how do they contact the parents? What lead time are the parents given? If the parents want the child to take the survey, how do they notify the school? If the parents don't want the child to take the survey, how do they notify the school? With regarding to the following books, first book is Rick by Alex Gino, the second book is George by Alex Gino, the third book is Gender Queer by Mayo Kobabe, and the fourth book is Lawn by Mark A. Roeder. Are any of these books in the Wilson County School or middle school libraries? If so, please list what books are in what schools. Who decides what books go in the school libraries, and how do parents find out what books are in the school libraries? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Suzanne Stott, speaking on behalf of Toys Not Middle.
Good evening. I'm
evening.
Suzanne Stott, formerly Suzanne Colbert. I was a sixth grade math teacher at Toys Not up until January of this year. Unfortunately, I am one of the multitudes of resignations from Toys Not. My point in coming to the board this evening is to put some uncomfortable conversations on the table. As educators, it's hard for us to know what the board is aware of or not, what information gets to you. I feel much safer and braver advocating for myself as an educator now that I no longer work for Wilson County Schools. However, having so many friends that work in the district. I know sometimes people are discouraged or challenged for coming forward. As Tina said, things have been a struggle for Toys Not. This year was my 4th year there, but it feels like Wilson County Schools doesn't care about Toys Not. I felt that way, and I was hoping Wilson County Schools would prove me wrong, but many times district initiatives did not fall in line with the needs for our students. As a staff, we studied emotional poverty, trauma-informed education, and ways to meet students' needs. We talk about how Maslow's hierarchy of needs should come before Bloom's taxonomy. However, district initiatives take precedence over that. Just this year, the struggle was knowing what was happening day to day in the classroom and then hearing board meetings not discussing any of those things. In October, there was a walkthrough in central office at Toys Not. It was my second block class that normally has 22 children. 8 of those were absent that day, so I had 14 students. Through the course of my second block class, due to quarantine contact tracing, that class dropped down to 4 students. This is the block of students that I eat lunch with, and we eat lunch in the classroom. One of our central office folks, as she was doing the walkthrough, took one step into my math classroom and saw 4 students and stepped out. She went into my coworker's classroom that had 21 students, only 7 of which had taken a test the day before. She walked into that classroom last few minutes of class and then gave a monologue to a student and the teacher about how students come for bell-to-bell instruction. I would say our students come to have their needs met, and we need to meet them where they are. There's a sign on the door on the way to Toys Not that says it takes a village. Sadly, I feel like Toys Not, as an individual school and community, has not had a village. Thank you for giving me time.
Elizabeth Herrera, Casa Azul de Wilson, updates.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Herrera, the Director of Community Investment and Advancement of Casa Azul de Wilson. And I'm here today for 3 reasons. First, May 1st is widely known as Decision Day, where seniors decide which college or university they will attend to enroll in. I recently learned that the efforts to celebrate Decision Day by Wilson County Schools CCAC advisors was canceled. It is unfortunate that such a milestone for our students isn't celebrated as much as it should be. Only 20% of the population of Wilson has a bachelor's degree. And even though not all students will seek post-secondary options, Casa Azul firmly believes that everyone should have the equitable access to seek this opportunity regardless of race or socioeconomic status. I would like to know how Wilson County Schools will uplift and celebrate those students that are going into post-secondary education. I think highlighting them on Wilson County Schools' social media would be a good idea. Second, as award season is approaching, I would like to know what language services will be made available for parents that do not speak English. Bilingual households attend these ceremonies and have no idea what is being said about their students' accomplishments. Recently, I was asked to present an award to a young Latina who has earned a full ride scholarship so that her family can fully understand and appreciate these students' accomplishments. I asked Wilson County Schools to consider giving parents the right to listen and understand all the amazing achievements of their child in the language they speak. Language justice should be prioritized. And lastly, Casa Azul de Wilson just released their first scholarship, Lo que quiero lo consigo. We'll be awarding 3 $1,000 scholarships to any Latinx high school senior in Wilson County. It is open to undocumented and documented students as well, and there is no GPA requirement, and the scholarship deadline is May 15th. The application can be accessed through the link tinyurl.com/LQQLC. I would like anyone who is present or watching to help us spread the word, because all we want is to help the students navigate this complicated process with intentional help and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Herrera Picasso, a case for rejection and a simulation.
Mi nombre es Flor Herrera Picasso y soy la directora ejecutiva de Casa Azul de Wilson. Estoy aquí por 3 razones. Primero, el 1 de mayo reconocido como Día de la Decisión, donde los estudiantes de último año de high school deciden en qué colegio o universidad intentarán inscribirse. Recientemente me enteré que cancelaron los esfuerzos para celebrar Día de la Decisión por parte de los asesores de CCAC en Wilson County Schools. Es lamentable que el sistema escolar no celebre a nuestros estudiantes que siguen su carrera educativa como deberían. Solo el 20% de la población de Wilson tiene un bachillerato. Aunque no todos los estudiantes buscarán seguir estudiando después de high school, Casa Azul firmemente cree que todos deben de tener acceso equitativo para buscar esta oportunidad, independientemente de su raza o nivel socioeconómico o el idioma del que hablan. Me gustaría saber cómo Wilson County Schools animará y celebrará a los estudiantes que ingresan a la universidad. Creo que destacarlos en sus redes sociales de Wilson County Schools sería un buen comienzo. En segundo lugar, ya nos acercamos a la temporada de premios escolares y me gustaría saber qué servicios de interpretación estarán disponibles para los padres que no hablan inglés. Los hogares bilingües asisten a estas ceremonias y no tienen idea de lo que se dice sobre los logros de sus estudiantes. Recientemente me pidieron a mi hermana Elizabeth que presentara un premio a una joven latina que obtuvo una beca muy importante para que su familia pueda comprender y apreciar completamente los logros de esta estudiante. Le pido a Wilson County Schools que considere dar a los padres el derecho de escuchar y comprender todos los increíbles logros de sus hijos en el idioma que hablan. Debería de ser prioridad, la justicia lingüística. Por último, Casa Azul de Wilson acaba de lanzar su primera beca. Lo que quiero lo consigo. Estaremos otorgando 3 becas de $1,000 a cualquier estudiante latino en el último año de high school en el condado de Wilson. La beca estará abierta a estudiantes indocumentados o con DACA. No hay requisito de promedio y la beca se cierra el 15 de mayo. Se puede acceder a la aplicación a través del enlace tinyurl.com/LQQLC. Me gustaría que cualquiera persona que esté presente o que esté viendo este video nos ayude a compartir la noticia, porque lo único que Casa Azul busca hacer es ayudar a los estudiantes que desean seguir estudiando después de la high school. And this message, I want to give it as Flor Herrera Picasso, the person, and I want to thank the 2 educators that came up today, and I want to invite you to consider running for office as Board of Education filing date is July 1st. Thank you.
Members of the board, you have the option of how we will respond. You can direct the chairman to respond to the concern on behalf of the board. You may direct the administration to respond to the concern, refer the matter to a board committee, refer the matter to the administration, or place the matter of concern on the agenda for a future meeting. What is your pleasure?
I think I'd like the administration to respond.
Is that the wish of the entire board?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so very much. Next on the agenda are the committee reports. We will begin with the Administrative Services Committee. Mr. Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This afternoon, Administrative Services Committee met, and for this evening, we have 2 information items and 8 action items. And the first information item is the Wilson County Schools COVID-19 updates. Dr. Williams.
Yes, sir. During the committee meeting today, we shared the current COVID-19 updates for 4/25/2022. At this time, we have 0 staff and 0 student active cases that are reported. And there was a report from the Wilson County Health Department for 4/25/2022. I did make note during our committee meeting that the average cases per day for the last 7 days is no longer tracked. Secondly, the percent of population fully vaccinated is at 53%. And finally, the CDC community transmission level is green, which is low.
Any questions, comments, discussion? Hearing none, let's go to information item 2, the presentation of the architects to share information, entertain questions. Do they have a place? If you would,
Just take a vote.
And this is in regards to Barnes and Lee Woodard projects.
Yes.
Hello.
Good
I'm
evening.
Adam Skinner with Skinner Farley Kerwin. With me, Kerwin with Skinner Farley Kerwin and Brad Farley with Skinner Farley Kerwin Architecture. We were asked to come speak tonight about the renovation projects at Barnes and Lee Woodard School. And to just start, maybe a recap of where we are and where it started. So back in early February of 2021, I was asked by Wilson County Schools to look at 4 existing schools about the possibilities of doing some renovation work, which we did. Those schools were Frederick Douglass, Wells Elementary, B.O. Barnes, and Lee Woodard. And we presented in mid-April of 2021, cost opinion for 4 elementary school improvements to do some improvements. It was not an all-encompassing report. It was just what could you do to renovate each school to some degree. It was about in May of 2021, they came back and said that they wanted to concentrate on B.O. Barnes and Lee Woodard to do the renovations of those schools, of which we also revised the numbers there for those schools for some renovations. In doing so, it was also indicated that the Wilson County was interested in getting the work started on some of it as soon as they could. And during that planning process, of course, the summer of 2021 was completely out of the question. As you know, any public bid work, you have to do the drawings, all this, and have to go through all the review agencies, including the Department of Public Instruction, so that takes a certain amount of time. So after that point, we began the planning for a phase 1, which work could possibly be bid in early 22, so that the work could be done in 2022. So in areas that we could do while the students were still in school. Summer only allows you about 9 or 10 weeks of work. So there's only but so much you can do in the summertime. And so therefore, in looking at both B.O. Barnes and Lee Woodard, we found areas that were included in the original cost opinion summary that we could do the renovation work, and we began the planning process in the fall to do that work. And so during the planning process, when we were more in-depth planning of each of the schools, you know, the decisions were made as to what to do and where to stop and where to start the work. And so we did that with phase 1, and I'm going to go over all this, but if you got any particular questions, I'll be glad to answer. But so we did that for phase 1 for both schools, and we bid those schools in January of 2022 with the idea that the work would start in the spring, go through the summer, and wrap up in the fall. And so we did bid phase 1 for both of those schools, and I think the total cost was $1,796,000. Of that, $900,000, I think, and $82,000 was B.O. Barnes, and Lee Woodard was $700 and some, and then an ad alternate to replace the floor in the gym, which is their multi-purpose playroom, with a sports flooring, which was accepted. And so that's what you're currently contracted to do for phase 1. We had a nice competitive bid with 5 contractors bid on the project, which is getting a competitive bid, and so those numbers were from the low bid. And so after getting that phase 2 and planning for phase 2, we looked at the numbers we got from phase 1. What were the current construction costs, and how would they be in phase 2? What would they reflect in phase 2? And so in planning phase 2, in giving the school budgetary numbers, which we did in March, tried to update them a little bit, and the numbers were higher. And in addition to that, you know, we increased the scope of work by trying to figure out where to stop and start in each of these schools to give a renovation that you could really tell that you've made a difference. And so that's currently led to that budget number. And then it was discussed and maybe indicated, well, you didn't want to shut down a school to do renovation work. You know you can't do but so much in the summer. So what would it take to do renovation work with the students in school, say at Barnes Elementary? So which we came back and we looked into that just to see what it would take if in fact that was something you wanted to entertain as a possibility. And so that would require renovating a half of school at the time and providing a temporary campus, enough with mobile units, so you could have enough capacity to keep the school going. So that was the latest cost estimate. Nothing has been bid. Phase 2 is still in the planning process. It can, we've not finished, we've not submitted any plans for review or anything. And so at this point in time, you can do as much or as little as you want to. Phase 1 construction has started at both schools and is on schedule to complete this fall. And I'll be glad to go over what we're doing in Phase 1, if there's any particular item you want to know. As an example, Phase 1, if you look at our original cost opinion, it is probably twice as much at Wells, but we added probably, by the time we got into the planning process and actually figured out where Phase 1 was going to stop and start, you know, we add some significant things, such as the 6 classrooms in the back wing that we're renovating. You know, they were kindergarten, first grade classrooms. They each had a toilet it was really very small, not ADA compliant at all. So we are removing the toilet and enlarging it to the current ADA standards. In doing that, we had to replace the millwork, which was 62 years old, and it was in very bad shape. And so that one millwork item, and the low bidder is scheduled value is $75,000, just to replace the millwork in the 6 classrooms. In addition, things like the exterior windows, the existing exterior windows we did have in the cost opinion improvements. When we got the bids, our estimate was a little short. The windows were more expensive. We were replacing the windows for an energy standpoint. That, again, 62 years old, they were in bad shape. And then it was discovered during the pre-bid when another asbestos survey was done in the school that nobody knew this. It wasn't in any previous asbestos reports that the school system have, and they have them for all the schools, that the glazing putty in the windows contained asbestos. So you're now replacing windows, and you've got the benefit of the energy and also the mitigation of asbestos. So it, to me, is a clear good thing to do, and money well spent. And that's just a particular item of that school. Again, at Lee Woodard, we did provide the alternate from the floor, and that was something to choose and pick from. I think it's a good idea that you did select it. Right now, the kids are playing on vinyl composition tile, VCT on concrete, which is kind of like hard surface of concrete. And all the new elementary schools that are designed today, you always put some kind of sports floor, and it has a little bit of cushion to it. It's not like a wood floor, it has a cushion. It's a cushion-baked back vinyl floor. So that, and it's a big gym. You know, a typical multi-purpose room for elementary wouldn't be that big, but since it was a high school, you know, at one time, obviously it's a space that's larger than normal. So anyway, so that's just part of that. There are many more things, and some of the difficulty in a renovation project is trying to, where do you stop and where do you stop? Start and where do you stop? And we were under the impression, and maybe it's my mistake, that there was a certain amount of money that the school system had to get started on these renovations, and you wanted to do what you could. I think there's been a lot of interest to go ahead and get something going so the county could see what you could do in improving the schools. And I didn't know there was a clear-cut financial end to it. I live in Wilson, you know, and I read the paper, and I didn't cue in at the time that the county may have just wanted to spend a certain amount. I think the paper indicated $2.6 million for counting both schools. But that, I wasn't aware of that. So that may be my fault. And you still can only spend that. You know, you spent, you know, 1.7 doing the phase 1, and it can be, you pick and choose what you do for phase 2 at each school. We can do whatever you would like to do and get done. So that's currently where things stand. I would ask Alicia if she wants to add something, and she's been heavily involved in the planning.
Hi, Alicia Kerwin. I think the only thing that I would add to what Ben has stated is that, things do increase over time. And as Ben first walked through these schools, he wasn't privy to just looking at the plans and studying them from a code perspective, right? This was just a list of needs and wants. And once you get into a school that was designed in the 60s, the code has changed for the better in terms of safety. There were some things that were potentially on the plans that had never been carried through for safety. And so in these plans, we are ensuring safe egress and exiting. That's our number one priority as architects. It's a requirement for us. And so a number of the items that are on the list that are covered in phase one provide safe exiting and safe dispersal areas for the students that are in the school. So that is an important part of the project. The second one is ADA compliance, which is federally mandated. And so it's been mentioned, those ADA restrooms, when he's talking about the millwork, that is now also ADA accessible. That back hallway in that area had a cross slope. That is also now going to be ADA accessible. So there are a lot of things that as you look and you get deeper into, and you're not just kind of walking through and saying, it would be great if we could do these 5 things. As you start to touch things, the scope grows, and as he mentioned, you kind of got to find a place to draw a line and say, this is what we can do, because this is where we can manage the work during the school year and not bother students because they can move into some other classroom. So I just say, when you start looking at things on paper and evaluating it and making sure that you're making a safe, compliant school for children that meets today's requirements for education, that's when things start getting added to the list. And I think phase one is doing that very well. So that's all I have to add. I'd be happy to answer questions more specifically if you have them.
Members of the board, questions?
I'm not an architect, but if we only have X amount of dollars to spend, just as architects, with your eyes, what would you feel would be the most urgent needs? You talk about asbestos in the window sills and 62-year-old windows themselves. What would you see as being the most urgent need?
Well, I think for both schools, one of the needs I think is very important are the secure vestibules that are to be added in phase two, both at Barnes and Lee Woodard. Barnes is much easier because there's a space within the walls of the existing school that we can do it with slighter renovations to the office area. In all schools that we design today, they're designed with secure vestibules. And so from a safety standpoint, I would think that would be your number one. I would think that would be one of the top choices. At Lee Woodard, it's more difficult. The existing building doesn't really present itself in a way to keep the safe exiting that Alicia was referring to. So we're going to have to do a small addition out front, which is very difficult the way the school is designed to accommodate it. But that's currently the direction that we are heading in there. To me, that would be. And then I think at Barnes, for instance, there's a group toilet that you're required to have in the old building across from the administrative wing that is way out of compliant, not even close. And to me, like at Barnes, I would pick those 2 things first. The windows have been there for 62 years. I think they're important. There are like 40-some left to do. There's 12 in the phase one, but the lion's share of them was in the front, that big main wing. It may be important. And at Lee Woodard, again, the secure vestibule to me would be the most important. You may want to look at the cafeteria building there that needs a whole lot of work. We were doing a lot of work there. I would encourage you to go look at that building. It's built in the early 50s, and it's in need of a lot of work and is in poor condition there. So, I mean, if it was mine, they would be I think they might be some of the most important things. These are not cosmetic things. These are real things that make a difference in the school, and I would think you want to address those.
Mr. Borkin?
First and foremost, I'd just like to thank y'all for being here. I think that what you've said kind of clears up a lot of the questions that I've had anyways. I can speak for myself. Yeah, when it came out about the cost overruns of phase 2, it sounds like to me what y'all were saying is that y'all haven't even bid phase 2.
We have not. No, we haven't completed the plans for phase 2. We haven't done, we haven't had any reviews. We haven't even had a final review session with the owner of the schools. We were just in terms of looking ahead, because again, we don't really know how much money, and it would be very helpful if we if we could know exactly this is what we want to spend complete, But what we wanted to do was show them the possibilities of what could be done, and then let them decide, or y'all decide, how that's going to be done. And so we're not, again, we're working on it. Yes, we are, but we're not finished. So we're not finished.
Well, yeah, it just seems like there was just so much question that came out when the newspaper article hit.
Right.
And the commissioners were talking about it. And, yeah, I can speak for myself, and I think some of the other board members, I mean, we were all just kind of scratching our head like, what happened? But, knowing that y'all haven't put phase 2 out for bid, and that this is an option, basically.
It's an option.
That we can tack on to what we're already doing. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I think it really helps clear the air.
Ms. Boyette?
Yes, I think it's answered a whole lot of questions. The commissioners told us they wanted some projects that could be completed over the summer at some elementary schools. That was what they told us, and you gave us this information with Barnes, Frederick Douglass, Lee Woodard, and Wales. And then we decided Barnes and Lee Woodard, and your figures here were 1.4 and 1.2, total of 2.6. So that is exactly what we asked the county commissioners for, 2.6. And they added that on to the overage with the amount we had from Watt. So they said yes, signed the paperwork, and attached that in the loan with the Watt, the 2.6. And so that's what my understanding was. Help me understand this. When the changes come in, like selecting floors and all of the items that were added that were not here, who's your contact? I mean, how were those decisions made?
Well, it's incumbent upon us as the architect to get into the plan. Again, we hadn't even started planning by the cost summer. We had done no planning. That's one walkthrough through each school. So we're doing a lot of guesstimating, and we're also just, in other words, we've not really honed in on what the building. We're visually seeing everything, but we hadn't studied it. In other words, we hadn't decided, and during the planning process, one thing tends to affect another, like the bathrooms and the casework, for instance, in there. So we made the decision and we suggested to the school system that you should replace the millwork. That was what we said you need to do, and so that's how decision was made. We said this needs to be done. We cannot really successfully do the other without doing that change. And then the floors are going to get disrupted by it because we're moving walls. And then the floors are 60-some years old, tile with asbestos on it. So that involves removing that and then new floor tile. So it's enhancing the room to me like the room's been renovated like a new classroom, and not like one or two things have been done within the room to make it just a little bit better. From an energy standpoint, like the lighting, a lot of it has old lighting and some of it mismatched a little bit, and new LED lighting from an energy standpoint, and from if the school's going to stay intact and over a long period of time, that the LED lighting would be a good, efficient way to do it. So we made that suggestion. That suggestion was in the cost summary too. I mean, we did indicate that, but we refined more of these things. And again, you get into it, and so you're like, well, we're stopping here, but, and maybe we didn't take the cost for, you know, when we did the initial walkthrough, again, it's hard to capture everything in one walkthrough. And we were doing 4 schools at one time at that point in time. When we decided just to do 2, you know, we started replanning and re-looking at the school to see, you know, we didn't want to stop short, so short that somebody says, well, you really didn't do anything. What did we do? You know, we might have done a little here and a little. It's a matter of deciding when and where. And we made the recommendation to the school system, to the school system to do that. Is what you know. And then that's how.
And so we don't doubt for a minute that the schools are in need of repair because of their age, and the commissioners do not either because they're the ones wanting us to build, consolidate and build new schools. So we don't doubt at all that the repairs are needed. It's just, I understand, we understood at 2.6 what it was going to cost, so that's exactly how much money we asked for, and I think that is where the part of the...
Can I say something? Hey, I'm Brad Farlow. So just so you know how a project usually goes, and the 2.6 million, I can see how you would take that as what you needed and go with it. We're currently in an unprecedented, I would say, completely unprecedented amount of escalation for costs of buildings. And I mean, you're seeing it in gas prices and diesel prices and all kinds of things, but we've never seen escalation like we're seeing now in schools. And I was at a conference this weekend with a lot of contractors and some other architects, and there's about to be a whole lot of work that's given out by the state of North Carolina, and it's only going to make the situation worse. So just, I mean, I think it's something you need to know when you're making decisions, because every month of delay there will be more escalation on all the costs, and it's not something we see an end to right now. So I just thought that was something you need to know about.
So part of the escalation is likened to a domino effect. That as you went in and you looked at one thing, and here's something else that catches, because if you're talking about putting up walls and interrupting your floors, with some of the floors we know that they're old enough that once that tile is moved, that's a likely exposure of asbestos, which means that now you've got to remediate for the asbestos because you moved the tile or that tile got broken. So where you initially may have thought it was just the putty around the windows where there was asbestos found, now you have a floor that's disruptive that calls for the mitigation of asbestos yet again. So that may not have been initially a thought of cost, but now it's there and would have to be addressed, because if you ever move that tile, we're obligated to remove that asbestos, correct?
Correct. We originally, like for instance, the project at Barnes, we originally were not taking the floors up in the classrooms in our first walkthrough. And then, you know, like we're replacing the marker boards and tack boards because we're painting the walls, we're doing the floor. If you look at the condition of the marker boards and tack boards, they're old and kind of beat up. It's not a big cost, but it's a little cost, but you would hate not to do that. I mean, to me, it doesn't add up if you don't. And so that's kind of why we make those decisions.
Okay. Other board members, you have questions or comments?
If I understand it, you pretty much clarified any questions I might have had, because there was a set amount of money that we were allowed, and it was phase 1. There's no obligation to phase 2 or any other phase or work. So there's no money spent or obligated. Hopefully there will be, because I'd like to see some other things done to the schools, but that's a matter of if the money is available and so forth. But you've answered all my questions, and I feel like we're in a good place, and it sounds like you've been real thorough and chose things to do that will benefit students, and on the long haul, work us towards having a school that will be in good shape. And for that, I thank you.
Mr. Breen and Mrs. Powell?
I don't have any comments.
Well, I just want to thank you for that because the cost of everything has increased. We had our committee meetings this afternoon. We were talking about the cost, how everything has increased, especially after COVID. So letting us know, we start with 2.6 million, that it may not stay that same amount as we move forward. So thank you for that bit of information.
Mr. Orkin, all your questions? You good?
I believe I am.
I agree. I think you
All right. Well, we thank you for coming and sharing with us. I'm sure if there are any more questions that arise, we will be knocking and saying we need a few more answers.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Don't hesitate.
Thank
all
you.
right, thank you so
Thank you
very
very
much.
Thank y'all.
Okay, that finishes our information items. Our first action item is face coverings. And face coverings, at last month's meeting on May the 21st, we approved a resolution of which I think is, would suffice now. And for this coming month, with just the approval with the change of date and new signatures. Do you have any questions? Anybody want to make comments? Well, regarding that, I move that we approve the resolution with the same wordage as last month with the change of date and new signatures.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the board approve on the continuing basis the resolution that was passed previously with the need of just basically changing the time dates as appropriate in moving this forward. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the sign of nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you in regard to our face coverings. Mr. Mercer?
Yes, ma'am. Our second action item is bids for school nutrition services. We have 3 contracts. R&H Produce to provide produce for cafeteria service at $270,678. Second one, Mayola Milk to provide milk for cafeteria service at $378,691.06. Heartland Payment Systems Limited to provide payment software for cafeteria service at $27,475 per year for 5 years, for a total of $137,375. Any comments or questions regarding these? Hearing none, Madam Chair,
Yes.
on behalf of the Administrative Service Committee, I move that we approve the R&H Produce contract, the Mayola Milk contract, and Heartland Payment Systems Limited contract.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the contracts for R&H Produce for $270,678, Mayola Milk, $378,691.06, and Heartland Payment Systems LLC for $27,475 per year for 5 years, totaling $137,370. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you. Our next action item was Community Eligibility Provision Program in Wilson County Schools, and this refers to the food service and the payment plans for individuals.
Y'all need to stop using bad
I
language.
mean, And I almost believe most, if not all, the board members were present when we discussed that. And it was very detailed in how we had options of grouping schools together according to their low income, or those people that would be, those students that would be eligible for free or reduced lunch. And the percentage of students had to be 40% or higher to be eligible for the programs. And how we could group them together and get more students. And when asked, our food service director indicated that she would recommend option 3, which would, a total reimbursement with that would be $4,145,119. And said that would serve the most students and feed the most students at the best prices.
I had one question that
Yes, sir.
that we didn't ask during committee, and I'm gonna ask Dr. Williams, and maybe he can answer it. If I'm not mistaken, didn't we say that the program ended June 30th?
June 30th.
So will our summer classes that we do, will they be serviced? How will they be serviced?
They go under a separate waiver that we use for summer feeding. There's a whole separate part just for summer feeding.
All right, that's perfect.
Now, also, I almost think this is contingent upon the program being renewed, if this is eligible to us. Is that correct?
No, sir. This ends June 30th. If it gets continued, we would move forward with it just like we did.
That's what I'm talking about. We would want option 3 if it is continued, is what I'm saying.
If the USDA chooses to move forward with the plan that we were on this year with all the schools, then we would go back to that plan. However, if they do not, which is the case right now, as of June 30th, right now, they will not be doing, the USDA will not be funding that at this point. That means that we will have locked in our base number of schools, the max amount for the best price that we can for the next 4 years.
Okay.
And then,
I knew there was something contingent upon a decision to be made, or one if something would be approved.
yes, sir. So if next year, whenever we pull our CEP numbers, if we go ahead and lock into our best number right now, financially and amongst schools, we get to stay at that.
Okay, for 4 years?
Yes, sir.
Regardless which way it goes?
But we also get to increase it if our numbers change in the other direction as well.
Yes, sir. Ms. Boyer?
The bad news is if we go with option 3, which does feed everyone free breakfast at every school, it does mean that 6 schools are no longer eligible for everyone in the school to eat free. And that those schools are Hunt, New Hope, Rock Ridge, Springfield, and Wilson Academy of Applied Technology, and Wilson Early College Academy. Those students would have to fill out applications individually, and other students would have to pay full price, or if they didn't qualify. I asked what the full price meal was going to be because anticipating, the questions, and those prices have not been set yet. But if USDA does not continue what they are on right now, if it ends at June 30th, then those 6 schools would have to begin paying for their lunches or qualify by an individual application.
Yes, ma'am. And Ms. Nairn also discussed universal breakfast, so that would still be available to those schools. So those 6 schools would still be given the opportunity for universal breakfast for those that did not qualify for free or reduced. But yes, ma'am, those 6 schools would have to complete the free and reduced application, and based upon their free and reduced application, if they qualify, they would still receive the free and reduced meals process.
But the big change is they've been eating free for several years, and they will not.
Yes, ma'am.
But this was an issue we were facing previously too. That we only had a finite amount of time that we were going to be grandfathered, and that some of the schools were grandfathered in. So I think that that's always going to be an issue that's going to come up before us, and the question was also raised previously, how do we handle this, particularly when siblings at different schools, some will be required to fill out an application, and we know that sometimes that was hit or miss because some people don't want to admit that there is a need, so that some children would still get their breakfast and or lunch while others would not be able to do so. So I think that's a quandary we're going to find ourselves in every time the set of regulations change. And how far, and we have been very fortunate that our child nutrition services personnel have been able to keep us in the loop of free breakfast and lunch for as long as they have possibly been able to do so. And I'm hopeful that once we started that, I have been very hopeful that we could continue it, but we also know that however the mandates come down will dictate how we are able to serve the children and make sure that less and less go hungry based on their ability to pay or not pay.
I think it's also worth noting that the criteria for those who are eligible for free and reduced lunch has been expanded. So it's no longer just folks who are receiving SNAP benefits and other benefits.
Right.
But also to any families who have Medicaid, or Medicaid.
I was also glad to see that the applications are in 9 languages, and online, paper copies, because that's important for all cultures to be able to access.
And there was something else she said too. She said that school nutrition is self-sufficient. I didn't
Yes.
realize that.
That's
It's like a
been- that's been the-
restaurant.
that's
It has
been-
to be, yeah.
It's a restaurant inside of a school. I
Yeah,
never
they
thought
have
of it as a
they have to
restaurant.
pay their own way. If they come up short, they have to find some way to subsidize it.
Right.
But at the end of the year, they have to come up slick.
They have always had to be self-sufficient.
Yes, I never thought of it that way until she said it.
It's a crazy way to
It's very
feed
impressive.
children.
Excuse me, I was agreeing with him saying it's a crazy way to feed children. It's also given a respite to all of us for many years, that if a child shows up with no money for lunch, we've not had to deal with that because and once again, we have 6 schools that, that could be an issue at again.
Yes. Okay.
And also to add to that, I remember when I was teaching, there were some students that had not had breakfast, and I appreciated the cafeteria making some type of sandwich or something so that child would not go hungry. So I appreciate they actually go above and beyond. Sometimes we don't really appreciate that, but they go above and beyond to the call of duty, making sure our students are, because we know a child that's hungry cannot learn. So it makes a difference to feed that child before so
Well,
they can function.
my deciding factor for me, I asked Ms. Nairn as directly as you can, what will serve our students, feed the most students, do the best job? And she said she felt like option 3 would. I mean, now, she gave us a bunch of information, and a lot of options, and this is and that's in there, but, and I understand, but and I wish it would be all the schools. I hope that it could be that way. But because of that, option 3 is what the committee seemed to settle on.
All right.
And again, for what it's worth, it is my hope, because I remember when I came on the board, one of the issues that was routinely discussed, or not routinely discussed, because, you know, our board did a good job of addressing it quickly, was whether or not students that don't have money would be able to have the same lunch as everybody else. And it is my hope that we will continue to do that.
Right.
That's a difficult one. I mean, and the reason it's difficult is not because of a lack of compassion, I think, on the school's part, but if that were to be an absolute, there's people that would spend their money other places and send their children to school without money, knowing we would look after them. And not that, that sounds bad, but I'm afraid there may be that person out there. So, I think schools have the authority to grant credit, although the school itself is responsible for it.
The school itself.
That's what I'm saying, they can't give credit for the county standpoint, but they say, yes, and at the end of the year, they have to settle that account because it is a self-sufficient kind of thing. And I think at the school level is where it might ought to be, because they know who can pay, and if somebody can't pay and the school has to come up with it, just, you're kind of so be it. But I'd rather, I'm with Ms. Boyette, I'd rather all the schools be able to have the meals, breakfast, and lunch without the children having to pay, or parents having to pay for the children. But as we now stand, option 3 is what the committee suggested. And so, is there any further comments or questions? Okay, on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, I move the full board approve option 3 regarding the Community Eligibility Provisions Program in Wilson County.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that we approve option 3 for the Community Eligibility Provision Program for Wilson County Schools. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1 with Mrs. Boyette casting the opposing vote. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you. The next action item is the contracts requiring board approval. The item that we have is the Progressive Design Collaborative Limited for air handling systems and heating air conditioning systems for Forest Hills Middle, New Hope Elementary, Elm City Middle, Vincent Bynum Elementary, at $650,000. And I think, and Mr. Boykin, you're more familiar with this than me, but I think that means they'll be going from a 2-pipe to a 4-pipe, and it'll also be including the control of humidity in the building.
Yes, sir.
Which to me means, I think that's correct, isn't it? Which to me, a couple of things, it should help a lot with children and employees that have allergies and so forth, and also prevent mildew within the school that might create health risk and damage to property as well. So, and I think that was to be funded through ESSER 3.
Yes, sir.
Funds, isn't it?
That's correct.
Anything you'd like to add, Dr. Williams,
No, sir.
or board members? Hearing none, on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, I move that the contract with Progressive Design Collaborative Limited be approved by the full board.
It's been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the board approve Progressive Design Collaborative Limited for HVA design services in the amount of $650,000. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Dr. Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The next item that we had
Yes.
was the Wilson County Board of Education electoral district boundaries, and we had some discussion in the committee in regards to the district boundaries. We referenced the resolution from January of 2014, and in the resolution, the board would utilize the same election districts as the Board of Commissioners. Those districts where the Board of Commissioners has changed, and we had the discussion that if there were any questions about moving or not continuing with the resolution in terms of utilizing the same districts as the commissioners, Ms. Cornetta was here to be able to answer any questions about that and walk through the discussion of what would need to happen next either way.
Because I believe, and might be getting ahead of myself, that it not only could be expensive but time consuming to do such.
Yes, sir, that's true. There's a process involved if you want to deviate from the Board of County Commissioners electoral districts. Theirs is based on the census change from 2021, and it is based on the population of the county being reduced by 3%. If you all wanted to deviate from their boundaries, you certainly could, but you'd have to undergo a demographer study and a public hearing, and there's a process to follow.
So, it was the Administrative Services Committee, it appeared that the thinking was it would be far smarter, quicker, economical to could ask that we renew or continue the resolution and adhere to the same boundaries as the county commissioners do. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, on behalf of the Administrative Service Committee, I move that we approve the resolution from 2014 that keeps our boundaries congruent with the county commissioners.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Powell and Mr. Breen, that Wilson County Schools continue the resolution as adopted in 2014, maintaining the same electoral district boundaries as those of the county commissioners to set the boundaries for the Wilson County Board of Education. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1 with Chairman Fitch in opposition to the vote. Mr. Mercer?
Yes, ma'am. Our next action item was the Wilson County Schools Resource Officers Memorandum of Understanding. And it's, I think the memorandum of understanding that we have now has served us well, and I think the Administrative Services Committee felt that we should continue with the same MOU. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, I move that we continue with the same memorandum of understanding as we have had previously, or had last year.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the Wilson County Schools Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding as presented to the board by the administration be approved. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mercer.
Our next action item was the 2021-2022 budget amendments. We have 4. The first 3 are budgeted for items such as salary, benefits, supplies, contract services, etc. The Amendment 103 is the State Public School Fund, and it's summer reading camps, transportation, early college literacy intervention. Any questions or comments or discussion about that? Our second one of those 3 was the federal Amendment 303 increased federal budget by $331,732.78. Grants for identification and location of missing students, IDEA, VIB, speech needs targeted assistance, and 21st century program. Any comments or questions about those or discussion? Hearing none. Special Revenue Fund Amendment 803 decreased the budget by $217,549.37. Highlights below: 21st century decrease due to federal going through DPI, athletic facility repair and renovation grant, NC pre-K, and FIFA services. Any comments or discussion? And the third one was a local current expense increase, the budget by $353,000 for additional funds allotted for the balance removal of structures at Hunt, removal of mobile units, and rent on the mobile chiller at Beddingfield. That was 201. Any questions? Hearing none, Madam Chair, I move on behalf of the Administrative Service Committee that the full board approve Amendment 103, 303, 803, and 201 as recommended by administration.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the board approve budget amendments 103 for the State Public School Fund, 201 the Current Expense Fund, 303 the Federal Fund, and 803 the Local Special Revenue Fund. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mercer.
Madam Chair, our next action item was 2022-2023 local current expense and capital outlay budgets. I think everyone got a copy of that. The Administrative Service Committee felt that this is what we discussed before. I think it was the last time we talked about it. And as far as the current revenue budget of $26,566,382. But in addition to that, there was discussion and a recommendation that we ask the county commissioners to increase our capital outlay budget by 20%, which has currently been being $1 million, and that would make it $1,200,000. Any discussion or questions regarding?
Just wanted I think everybody was here at that point, but just to say it out loud, the reason for the additional 20% is sort of to fall in line with the increased cost of everything, increased cost of materials and the projects that we typically hope to undertake with that $1 million capital outlay budget. We anticipate being more expensive.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion, questions? Hearing none. On behalf of the Administrative Services Committee, I move that we approve the current revenue budget of $26,566,382 and request a 20% increase in our capital outlay budget as recommended by the committee.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Borkin and Mr. Breen, I believe, that we approve the current expense budget request for $26,566,382, and the capital outlay request be at an increase of 20% for a total of $1,200,000. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair, that completes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mercer. Members of the board, the Instructional Services Committee met this afternoon. We have informational items and we have action items. I'll do the information first and then pass over to Mr. Mercer. Under the contracts requiring board notification, as noted at the beginning of the meeting, we have removed green light from consideration at this point, and it will be brought back to us in May. So we are asking for $55,983.11 for Encore, $51,916.60 for Alexia, and $58,330 even for Paxton Patterson. Encore is in regard to view boards for the AIG classrooms. Lexia deals with reading and letters training, and Paxton Patterson is in regard to college and career ready labs. Elm City Middle was the first lab, and it was a demo project, and we are now ready to put that particular lab in Spate Middle and Forest Hills Middle, so that these are the feeder schools into our high schools, and so that this would better prepare our students for career explorations and the work at the high school level. That was an informational piece. Are there any questions? The second informational item deals with revised policy 4300, Code of Student Conduct. This is the first read. I think there were some points that were made in committee that the staff was asked questions about, but if you have any other questions, please direct them to the administration, because next month these will come to us as a part of the second read, so would be asked to be looked at for actual enactment. Are there any questions? Mr. Vice Chair, I'll turn the meeting over to you for the action items.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have contracts that are requiring board approval because they have passed the threshold of the $90,000 as required by policy. We have several of those contracts that are coming before us. The first is for the 95% Group Limited that deals with phonological awareness and phonemic awareness in our reading programs at the K2 core level and at the 3-5 core level. ANC, or Applied Network Consulting, is dealing with access points, through E-rate funding. The 95% group is in the amount of $375,771.76. The ANC contract is for $1,040,000 $1,412.94. Dreambox is dealing with math at the K-5 level and is moving to a 2-year license in professional development. This is a renewal contract. We currently have a 1-year contract with Dreambox, but administration is looking to move that to 2-year licensing agreement. Encore is a cabling contract, again through E-rate. I'm sorry, let me go back to Dreambox. It's $257,812. Encore, the cabling contract is for $572,944.59. Then a second Encore contract for $148,790.96. And Mr. Mayo showed us a picture that I think was worth at least 1,000 words, which showed our computer server, thank you, that looked like a bunch of spaghetti with wires everywhere. And what it will be replaced with is a much more efficient, if it's not anything else, it's more efficient looking because you do not have all of those spaghetti wires, and will be much more easily accessible by the staff as they deal with all of the computer minutia involved in taking care of those servers. I don't understand how they work it all, but they work their magic. So then we have a contract for Instructure that deals with assessment and professional development for $127,746.16. And then Lexia, which is a 2-year Core 5 reading subscription and license renewal. Again, with this Lexia program, we have been using we have had a 1-year subscription, and it's now, they're asking for 2 years at $328,550. It is the request of the Instructional Services Committee that we move this forward for approval by the board. Therefore, Mr. Vice Chair, I move that the contracts that require board approval, as mentioned, 95% Group LLC, ANC, Applied Network Consulting, Dreambox, Encore, Instructure, Encore, and Lexia be approved as presented by the administration.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the full board approve contracts that require board approval. 95% Group Limited, Applied Network Consulting, Dreambox, Encore, Instructure, Encore, and Lexia as presented by administration. Do we have any further comments or questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. It carries unanimously.
Thank you. The next item for action is the North Carolina Alternative Schools Accountability Model. Members of the board, each year we are required to select an option for use with our alternative school at Daniels, our alternative program. The administration is recommending that we continue with option B for that assessment and action. And it is the wish of the Instructional Services Committee to recommend the approval of that. Therefore, Mr. Vice Chair, I move that the Wilson County Schools accept option B for the North Carolina Alternative Schools Accountability Model.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the full board approve option B for North Carolina Alternative Schools Accountability Model. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. It carries unanimously.
Mr. Vice Chair, this is a second reading for the revision of policy 6316, other employees as bus drivers. There were just a couple of changes that were asked for since the first reading of this policy. You will find that in blue. It was asking that we be consistent with using the DOT medical certification. It's found on line 31, and that on line 48, there was a question as to the language that was used in terms of drivers serving their own school and stricken drive at the school only. Those were the only changes that were made on the recommendation of the committee. I move that the full board approve the revision of policy 6316 of the employees as bus drivers.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the full board approve the revised policy 6316, other employees as bus drivers, as a second reading. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. It carries unanimously.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes,
the last action item for the Instructional Services Committee is the revision of policy 7240, drug-free and alcohol-free workplace. This too is a second read that comes before us, and there were no changes that were sought, as this was, there were a couple of inserts as indicated by the red lettering. But on the recommendation of the Instructional Services Committee, I move that we approve the revision of 7240, drug-free and alcohol-free workplace.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that the full board approve the revised policy 7240, drug-free and alcohol-free workplace, as a second reading. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. It carries unanimously. It's all yours, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the proposal for the 2022-2023 Board of Education meetings. Members of the board, we typically meet on the third Monday of the month, but over the last few years have shifted the meeting dates for the months of November, December, and January. As well as the month of June. The administration is asking that we change our schedule for the 2022-2023 school year, asking that we change our meeting to November 21st, 2022, which is the third Monday, due to North Carolina School Boards Association Annual Conference on November the 14th. So this is actually putting this back on the third Monday, which had been our usual meeting time on the third Monday of the month. So this year, it will come back to the third Monday. For January the 23rd, to move the meeting to the fourth Monday. April 24th to the fourth Monday. And June the 5th to the first Monday. The 5th of June in regard to Human Resources needing to make deadlines for the state by June the 15th. January and April to the 4th. We usually meet on the 3rd, but the third Monday in January is a legal holiday. And the third Monday of April next year, due to board packet development that will come after extended break. So the chair would like to have your feedback onto the request made by the administration, and we can proceed from there.
Remind me, Dr. Fitch.
Yes.
Or Madam Chair, Father. In January, we're moving the meeting
to the fourth Monday. We had been moving it backwards to the second Monday because the third Monday was or is a federal holiday. And they're asking for the fourth Monday because the second Monday would be right after the after the Christmas break and just before the holiday break, and they're needing more time, so they would like for that to go to the fourth Monday. And the same in April because we have the Easter break that comes in, and otherwise they will not have the benefit of having staff available.
I'm fine with the proposed changes.
Okay?
Fine.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, sounds fine.
So the chair will entertain a motion in regard to the suggested changes as being presented by the administration. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Boyette.
I move that we approve the proposed meeting dates given to us by, suggested to us by the administration.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the proposed calendar changes for the Wilson County Board of Education meetings. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Mrs. Barnes.
Madam Chair and board members, I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 U.S.C. 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning the potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Boykin, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned to closed session.